you're afraid to fail, guaranteed you'll fail. And so you just have to change that mindset.
Stop trying and just be. And that is the success.
Most pilots don't understand what career opportunities are available in the world of aviation. They're making career decisions based on advice from friends or posts on internet forums, meaning they are taking huge risks with their livelihood without having all the details. This podcast was created to help you understand the aviation industry so you can find your dream job. Let's get ready for Pushback. Here's your host and my dad, Nick Fialka.
Hey, pilot, welcome back to Ready for Pushback. I'm Nick Fialka. It's great to have you today. I am interviewing Michael Phillips, who is my mentor. And he's more than just my mentor. He is a person who I've spent most of my life with, who I have spent time bouncing everything back and forth with since I was a child. And I tell you what, I hope and pray that you can find a mentor like that. And I'll tell you this too. You need to look back and see who you can bring with you and you can make better and you can build up, because he is a person that just gives and gives and gives, and he wants you to succeed. And what an amazing human. He's a certified flight instructor. He's a lot more than that, but that's his bread and butter. That he is the guy that just wants to love on people and teach people and give. I'm so thankful that I have him in my life, and I'm glad that I got an opportunity to capture this conversation just so that I can have it, because it's that important. And if you are looking for a mentor, you need to be able to find somebody like Michael, somebody that is going to be part of your life for the long run. And you have to be deliberate about it. If you are a mentee, you need to reach out to your mentors consistently. You need to spend that time, put the effort forward. Michael and I talk every week, and he calls me or I call him. But a lot of times it's me calling, checking in, updating, getting advice, finding out, just saying hi, saying I love you. That's it. And that's so important. So this is such a good episode. I hope you enjoy it as much as I did. It's just the best. It's the best. Sit back, relax. Let's get ready for Pushback. Hey, pilot, did you just get a new conditional job offer? Are you getting out of the military and going to move your family across the country? Are you going to move in base somewhere, or are you going to go out to find that second home that you've been looking for? Well, I want you to stop right now, pick up the phone, and call Marty and the team at Trident Home Loans. It's an organization that's run by pilots. They understand pilot pay. They understand contracts. They understand military. They have the best VA loans in the United States. Marty and his team have been doing mortgages for years. They've been doing my mortgages for years. I trust him and his team more than any other organization. I challenge you to get a better deal anywhere else. Go ahead, reach out, get a mortgage quote, and then call Marty and his team. They will walk you through the process and show you how competitive their rates are. So go right now, TridentHomeLoans.com, and check them out. All right, here we are, Michael Phillips. Hey, Mr. P, how are you?
I'm terrific, Nick. It's great seeing you.
Man, it's so good to see you. This is other than talking to Anna on our show on episode 100, this is just the best. Such a highlight for me. Will you tell everybody who you are?
My name is Michael Phillips. I live on the left coast in the beautiful town of San Buenaventura, known to most people as Ventura, north of Los Angeles. I am for all intent and purposes, an independent flight instructor. Have been for most of my career, since 2005. I've been a flight instructor since 1975, and was part of my life, but it wasn't my life until 2005, when I had decided that it was time to wasn't so much about the aviation as much as it was about being able to teach and to be able to work with other people. which is something that has always been my passion. I think I inherited it from my mother, bless her heart. And so at that point, I sold my last business and decided that this is what I was going to do. And at the time, we lived in your favorite little town of Carmel, my friend. And then I was at that point, I was already working as a chief flight instructor at a small flight school there. And 2008, moved down here to Ventura. And I've been down here ever since. I have what I call my office or my man cave, really, here at the Camarillo Airport. And my airplane happens to be a Redbird MCX AATD, which is a very important part of what I use in terms of trying to bring people into the winged world, if you will. And when I purchased it, it was really more a matter of being able to reach out to general aviation pilots who own their own airplanes, who I knew at that particular point in time were not availing themselves of tools like simulators to be current and to try to get better at what they were doing. And so since then, I've been here. I'm on the staff also at Santa Paula at CP Aviation, which is a wonderful operation in terms of, it's a Part 61 school, but it's been there since the runways were dirt back in the 20s. But now they're not dirt anymore, even though there's one small grass strip right next to it. But that's where I am now. And I've had the privilege of being able to teach all around the country by virtue of my relationship with, in the early days of Columbia Aircraft and the Columbia 400s, and then to become the Corvallis, and then the Cessna 400, and then the TTX. In about 2015, I started flying the Epic LT, which is the experimental version of what is now a certified single-engine turbine, flight level 340, 310 knots. And I spent the last 3.5 years working as a mentor pilot with people that have gone out and purchased that terrific airplane. But for the most part, I'm here in my little nest at Camarillo, and I'm working with private, commercial, instrument, and particularly working with CFI candidates. The CFI side of it is my passion and my joy. And I do that completely pro bono because I think it's really important to give back, because I think you and I share that particular mindset. And so there's that. And I happen to be on the board of the Society of Aviation Flight Educators, and I am the national coordinator for the Master Instructor Continuing Education Program, which is better known as Master Instructors, which was started by Sandy and Joanne Hill back in the mid-1990s. And when Sandy passed away, I promised Joanne that I would certainly be there with her and for her to keep it going. And then a couple of years ago, we went ahead and integrated it under the umbrella of SAFE, and I continue to run that part of the program.
And how did you and I meet?
Telephone call.
Yep. A telephone.
Shane Cooper. Better known as the captain. When the captain comes out to play, oh my Lord. But he said, I think there's somebody that you should talk to. And I think you were on one of the teams that he was sponsoring when you were racing bicycles. And he said, I think you need to talk to him. And so our relationship began with that phone call, and then continued over the years as you continued to evolve as a human being. Went down to the Citadel and did what you did there. Got accepted into the Navy flight program. And during that whole time, I had said to you, Nick, if you get your wings, I will be there the day you get winged. And so that's when we met for the very first time, when you had your wings pinned on at Pensacola. And I met your entire family and the dog. Oh, my Lord. But that's where we first met. So when you got winged was the first time that our paths crossed. And then you continued to roll in and out of our lives. When you, after flight school, you ended up in San Diego. And you came up and stayed with Amy and I and Carmel. And then we have continued to stay in touch and continued to talk and be in each other's life until that day in 2017, when after a phone call that I had received from you and said, Michael, I think it's time. Because we'd been talking about whether you should go to the airlines or not, or whether it even made any sense. And so you called. I said, okay. I picked you up at LAX on the 14th of July. Had already scheduled your check ride for the 25th. Because what Nikki needed was a multi-engine rating and 26 hours in the airplane. So the thing that I remember the most about this is that as we're driving to my house from LAX, we're chatting, and first of all, he shares with me, well, I'm not current. I have no light civil time. I don't know what a glass cockpit looks like. And oh, by the way, you're going to put me in a DA-42, which is a twin-engine diesel. And I laughed, and the way I share this with other people about it was like, here's a guy that was sitting around on the side of the pool, maybe thinking that he might become an alternate. And all of a sudden, the coach comes up and says, you're going to be racing in the Olympics. And oh, by the way, you have 10 days to get ready. Now, during the middle of those 10 days, I needed to take an Epic to Oshkosh for AirVenture. And if you remember, I asked Omar Lala to take care of you relative to your instrument side of the equation after we had been flying, and I would be back to finish you up. And so, as my wife shared with me, you were absolutely just completely and totally wrapped around the axle trying to get yourself ready for your check ride on the 25th. And one of my favorite pictures is of you and Greg Lewis in my office and his 1960 whatever Corona typewriter, and trying to take care of your paperwork. Because as we got there, as you normally will do, you never do anything easily. You never do anything without a little bit of drama attached to it. And there was drama attached to that one. But fortunately, we got it fixed with a couple of phone calls. And look at you now, all grown up. And that's really how the story kind of got to that particular point. And then it's continued throughout it's up to today. And I've enjoyed listening to the podcasts and even getting more insights into you that I never really had by nature of when we got our time together. It was always, short spurts where we never really got to really get down to the fact that I had never known that you had wanted to be a priest. We share that in common, by the way. But I bailed out much earlier than you did, because look at you now. You conduct the services here on Ready for Pushback at least twice a week. It's pretty funny. But anyway, that's kind of how it evolved into here, and we've continued to check in and out of each other's lives. And I'll never forget when I was doing flight training down there in Alabama, and you and Anna came and met me and we went out to dinner at whatever that place was over there on the Redneck Riviera. But it was something else.
Lambert's, yeah. You mentioned the drama that happened when I was going to get my multi-engine. First, I want to say, like, I got so much, like, you just covered the entire interview in 13 minutes. So I want to so much to unpack, but we'll start with the drama, right? So I showed up. I hadn't flown in, I don't know, since 2009, and so not one thing, not even sitting in an airplane. And so I struggled my way through learning how to use a glass cockpit and fly a multi-engine aircraft and what you're supposed to do and all those things. And then it was so hard. It was so hard. And it came time for the check ride, and he shows up and he's like, "All right, let me see your certificate." And I handed him my certificate, and it was from 2003. It was a paper certificate that they used to give, the FAA used to send you. And I had that thing. I just had that thing in a filing cabinet just because somebody said, "Don't throw it away." I had no idea how important it was. And when I showed it to him, he looked at me like I had two heads. He said, "What is this?" And I said, "Well, it's my certificate." And he said, "No, man, this is not a certificate. This is an old certificate." And I said, "But it doesn't have an expiration date." He says, "The FAA stopped using this 10 years ago. It's not good for anything." And it was luckily a weekday, because I had to call the FAA and get them to send some kind of fax paperwork over to allow me to even take this check ride. It almost didn't even start. And, but they were able to do it, and praise God for that. That's amazing.
Yeah. But, I think too that particular situation never even really crossed my mind until it came up when we're sitting right there. And I thought, oh Lord, I guess I should have caught that. But, it was not one of those situations that I even anticipated. But fortunately, Greg, bless his heart, may he rest in peace. He was a good friend anyway, and was willing to go ahead and do what we needed to do to get that done. And fortunately, you did a good job. Once again, being Navy trained somehow, some way, and I have seen this with particularly every Navy pilot I've ever had the privilege to work with. And generally, when they come to me, it's been a while. But you can see the way that the wiring has been changed in your brain to be able to go ahead and attack something that needs to be attacked. And it was very interesting to watch that. And you're not the only one that I've seen it in, but in your particular case, it mattered most to me there that you, in fact, were able to really embrace that particular challenge. Because at that point, you and Anna, you were all in for all intent and purposes. Even though they hadn't started to roll the dice, you were all in. And, the decision making that came up to that point in time, I know that it was traumatic and it was difficult. And you've shared it with your listeners over the various episodes on that particular part and in the very beginning. And so it was a very interesting time to watch you at, I think, what were we at that point, 38?
Yeah.
At that juncture, about 37, 38?
Somewhere right there, yeah.
Yeah. And so it was, again, though, I was alluding to the Navy training. You were able to do what you had to do because that's the way they had wired your brain.
Timothy P. Pope is a certified financial planner dedicated to guiding professional pilots through smart financial planning. Whether it's saving for retirement, investment management, a seamless military transition, or strategic tax planning, Tim is your trusted financial partner. Also, you can join Tim as he leads engaging discussions on personal finance and strategies for professional pilots on the brand new Pilot Money podcast. Timothy P. Pope, helping professional pilots make the most out of life. I felt the same way during Captain Upgrade at my airline because I had gone a year without flying on military leave. And then I jumped into this Captain Upgrade, which I would never, ever, ever recommend for any human on the face of the earth. But it was the same experience. I'm such an idiot. It was so dumb. And it was so hard. But, just kind of went back to that same idea of flight school mode and nonstop studying, like minimal sleep, like trying to balancing not being fatigued and also being able to perform, and also knowing the a massive amount of knowledge that you have to know. And I never thought I thought it was going to be the end. I really did. I just, as I was doing it, I was like, what did I get myself into? And it was not. I don't know why I keep doing this. Why do I keep putting myself in that position? I don't know.
I don't know. Again, I think that's part of your wiring on the one hand. It's like sitting there and getting into the Peloton and trying to decide, okay, what am I doing here? Why do I feel like I feel right now? Do I really want to go ahead and do this? Well, of course I do. And it's that same kind of thing. And I think that is what's driven you. The thing that's been so interesting about listening to you on the podcast is that your self-deprecation is pretty amusing to me. The reality is, dear friend, that you wouldn't be where you are now if you didn't have, I'll call them skills, and the ability to perform when it's time to perform. Sometimes you maybe step left when you should have stepped right, but nonetheless, you're still performing. And that's what's been so very, very interesting about watching you in your process, even getting to the left seat. A year ago when you were doing this, getting ready, you had sent me a picture that you had set up at that particular point, reasonably new house in Kennesaw, I think. Is that where you are, Kennesaw?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And you sent me the picture, and you got your legs crossed, and you don't have shoes on, and here's a picture of your toes, and behind you is the whole panel of the 7576 layout. And you're just sitting there, and you were sharing with me the level of craziness that you had stepped into. And I loved it so much. I was doing a presentation last year at Oshkosh relative to transitioning to, it didn't really matter, but to transitioning aircraft. And so that particular image played an interesting role in my process of talking to people in terms of sharing commitment, because it is a huge commitment, and it's not just a little bit. And so that part was, again, it's just been very, very interesting, in terms of we're talking about our being here together now as a result of one friend reaching out to me and saying, hey, and look at now, here we are all these years later, and our relationship has never been stronger. And it's always been one of these situations where it's really all about vignettes. Our life together has always been vignettes. And it's been really, really fun. And, you brought up the interview with Anna. And I know that the people that listen to this podcast, if they weren't completely moved by the honesty and the sincerity and the love that you two shared with each other and with everybody that was listening, was pretty incredible. Because I don't think very many people would have gone ahead and stood out there butt naked in front of the world and share what the two of you shared. And I'm sure that it helped. And I know I've talked to pilots, and people that have seen that. And I've been encouraging them to take a look at it if they're in a situation where they're trying to make these decisions. And but again, it's an example of the power of that particular partner in your life and the impact she had on you, but also the way that it has helped you evolve to where you are now.
Yeah, she's a good human. She's awesome.
Very good human.
So good. We met we met on the phone like 1995. And I wonder why our friend Shane Cooper, who was kind of like, he was my boss, right? He was like the sponsor of my team.
Yeah.
And I was a kid and he was probably 35 or something like that.
You're
And
what?
he was probably 35 and I
Yeah.
was, I was 16. So he was, an old man. And why did he ask you to talk to me?
Because in 1994-ish, Shane was in the process of trying to take defeat to another level. This is a sock company, for those of you that may be listening, that was primarily for cyclists, because Shane was a passion, and Shane and his wife very passionate about cycling. And Shane had taken over the sock business that his father had started. And he was doing socks for people in the bicycle industry at that point. And I was running a company at that point in time that was involved at the higher end of the market, racing and competing and representing European manufacturers in the United States. And I wanted to do some branded socks for CD and Look, two of the companies I was representing. And so we and I and Shane did what he was doing with Defeat. But one of the things that I had said to Shane at that particular point was, I want you to put your name on the socks. I want your name to be down there on every pair of socks that comes in here with CD and Look on it. And for whatever reason, that particular suggestion changed the role that his sock company was playing in the industry at that point in time. And things started to take off for him. And so at that point on, Shane had said to me, that made the difference. And I'll never, ever forget what you had done to help me at that particular point in time. And that started our relationship. And so over the years, we have continued to roll in and out of each other's life. I had an opportunity for a while to serve as on the board of advisors to Defeat. And it's just been that's how it started. And and then at that point, he felt, I don't know what he saw in you, other than it was this wild kid. But he said, I want you to talk to him, because I don't know whether at that point you'd been talking at all about aviation. It's quite possible that you might have been, so you weren't. So I don't know where that connection came, because I'd been flying at that point. I started flying in 1967. Yes, spoiler, I'm an old man. But I don't know why he did that, other than the fact that maybe he felt you and I might have an opportunity I may be able to help guide you along. And so that's how it started. And I guess it was just, again, my wanting to help Shane unconsciously. It was just put your name on it. Take some credit for what you're doing. And that's, I guess, how it started. I don't know any other way to explain it. We'd have to ask Shane.
Yeah, I should. I was not, aviation was not on my radar at all. I think I thought I was going to be like a super famous pro bicycle racer until I realized like I wasn't talented enough. But then I really fell into aviation because it was like a series of steps. I had to find my way to college because I felt like I really wanted to go to college. I felt like that was the only way out of the little town that I was living in. And every I felt like I had to leave. I had to get out. I just felt like that was in me. I don't know why. And so um when the gentleman um a guy paid for my first year at the Citadel who lives in Hickory, who has passed away recently, and he gave me this check one day. He like called me out to his house, and he was kind of the rich guy in town, and he knew my grandfather, and I had really barely spoken with this guy. His kids were my age, but he said, I mean, he literally brought me out to his house and kind of introduced himself, and we talked, and he's asked me what I wanted to do and what it was going to take. And I told him I wanted to go to college, but instead I was going to join the Marines and enlist in the Marine Corps because I didn't have any money for college, and maybe in a few years I could make it to get to college. And he said, "Do you really want to go?" And I said, "Yes." And I had already been accepted to the Citadel and all that stuff. And he asked me how much it cost. And I told him, and he wrote me a check for that amount, and he handed it to me. And he said, "This is for your first year. You've got 3 more to figure out." And that was the catalyst that like changed everything, right? That was the thing. And so when I got there, it was really hard. It's not a place to take it easy. And so I had a real hard time with it. It was very difficult, but I studied really hard, just like the 757 captain upgrade stuff. And I got good enough grades to get that Navy scholarship. And that covered the last 3 years. That's literally why I joined the Navy, is to get the scholarship. And because I didn't get the Air Force one and I didn't get the Army one, but I did get the Navy one. And then you had to choose what you wanted to be. Do you want to be a Navy SEAL? Like, look at me. No way. Do you do you want to be on a submarine? Do you want to be on a ship, or do you want to fly? And if you chose the first three, you only had a 4-year commitment. But if you chose the last one, it was like 10 years. And I initially chose to be on the ship because I was like, I'll just do 4 years and get out and be done. And then I'll go make millions as a businessman. Because I knew I would, right? And at one point there was an F-14 Rio, a backseater, who was there, and he was a great dude. And he said to me, like, we made our selections, and he calls me into his office, another meeting face to face, and he's like, "What the hell are you doing? You don't want to do that. This is like so boring. You're gonna be bored for 4 years, or you can go have fun for a decade." I was like, "No, 4 years, I can't do it. I don't want to be in for 10." He's like, "Dude, trust me. Like, this is such a bad choice. Do not make this choice. This is not for you." He's like, "I'm not going to let you do it. You can't do it." And I was, I felt really pressured, and so I did it. And I mean, like, look at it, it's consumed my whole life, right? Like, it's become like my identity a lot bit. And it's just people taking interest in wanting to help has been my story. All of it. The podcast, Tron took an interest, wanted to help. Me going to the airlines, you took an interest, wanted to help. Like Mr. White, who paid for my college, like took an interest, wanted to help. Why? Like, I don't know. I'm thankful, grateful.
Yeah.
But
But
you, go ahead.
go ahead. Go ahead.
You've just been there the whole time. Like, we talk nonstop every week, nonstop for 30 years.
Yeah. Yeah. And but the thing that is so interesting to me is that when I take a look at my path, I mean, after, I was going to go in the Marine Corps as a pilot. And when I went through the PLC program, this was during the Vietnam War, here I am. I'm opposed to the Vietnam War, but what do? I raise my right hand. All enemies, foreign and domestic, and I go into the Marine Corps. And I was going to be a pilot. And I don't even remember quite what before I even got to the basic school. But I think there were a couple of things that came along, but I had decided at that point that I was not going to fly. I already was a pilot. I was almost close to my commercial rating at that point because I had started flying when I was a freshman in college. We had a flight school, a flight club in Cal Poly. And so I started flying there. And in the summer months, because I lived in San Luis Obispo, I went ahead and ran the flying club in the summer months and worked at the airport and was a line kid, did all of that. And, but for some reason, I know part of it had to do with being a helicopter pilot during Vietnam. And there was no way that I was interested in that at that point. And so, as it turned out, I ended up becoming an infantry platoon commander, and I had a weapons platoon. And it was probably the things, I'm not a fatalist or anything else. I mean, you roll through life, things come in front of you, you go left, you go right, you go straight, or you stand there frozen and like a deer in the headlights. But it was the right choice for me. And it made all the difference in the world. I was the oldest of 9 children. And my mother had been in the Marine Corps. And she introduced me to some of her friends that had been. One of them was the chief of staff of MCRB in San Diego. And Tommy was just a terrific guy. And you go down there and you take a drink of that water and you think, Look how good they look in those dress blues, But so then I went into the Marine Corps. I went through the PLC program. So it was between freshman and sophomore year, you go to OCS. And then between junior and senior year, you go to OCS. And then when you graduate, you're commissioned, and then you go into the Corps. And so I was on my way to Pendleton, then off to Southeast Asia. And before the orders were acted on to go to Pendleton, I received orders to go back to Camp Lejeune. And they were putting together a deployment, the amphibious unit that goes to the Med every 6 months. And it turned out that at the time, Lieutenant Colonel Al Gray, who subsequently became Commandant of the Marine Corps, was the battalion commander. And he had been brought in because first, at that particular point in time, this particular unit, the Marine Corps, had been struggling. And this is still Vietnam, kind of post-Vietnam for the Marine Corps now starting to wind down. But I had an opportunity because I had a secondary MOS as an embarkation officer of loading ships and doing that kind of stuff. And I got to work directly with him. But watching him evolve and watching him lead and watching him how he mentored not only his officers, but his enlisted people, I know changed me and my perception of everything in terms of how to lead and to how to navigate life. And an extraordinary human being. And he cared about his troops. And having been around him made a huge difference. And so that really kind of started me down this taking care of others. And of course, I mentioned my mother at the beginning of our discussion, and my mom had a lot to do with that because, we were a large family, but every time you turned around, one of her strays would come in because they needed some help from my mother. So our house was always packed full of absolute chaos. And she was just an amazing soul to how she managed her own children and then the adults and people that came in wanting guidance. And that's where it came from. And so it just kind of evolved. When I was a senior in high school, I left San Luis Obispo and went to Los Angeles and lived with this wonderful man that lived on the same street as my aunt, whose wife had just died. He was a professor emeritus at the USC Graduate School. He was the kindest, most loving human being in the world. And he said, I went and knocked on his door and said, his wife had passed away. I said, would you like a roommate? And he said, yes, I think I would. So I spent my senior year in high school living with Larry and going to St. John Vianney, a.k.a. Daniel Murphy High School, Catholic Boys High School, worked at Belden's Market, and realized at that particular point, no matter where you go, you take you with you. So if you don't like what you're looking like at in the mirror, then you damn well better fix it. And that was my time being with Larry. And these people, and you said it, you pay it forward as you go. And that's how it's evolved. And that's why we're sitting here right now having this conversation.
Well, I've been trying to get you on this show for a year.
Yeah. Well, and quite frankly, I didn't think I had anything to share. But then after listening to you and Anna, I said, yeah, we got lots to share. Yeah. But, and for all the people that are listening, those that are still with us, it is really critical, regardless of what you're doing, to continue to be, just have your volume control knob turned up really loud, because there's always going to be somebody out there that maybe even for 10 minutes needs a hand, maybe for 10 days, maybe for a lifetime, they could use a hand. Just be available, because you never know. You never know what might be possible or what help you might be able to provide them. But that's what mentorship's a state of mind. And then if you've got the heart, if you will, to share it, then you're there and you listen and you do the best you can. And sometimes it's gentle, and sometimes you need to call the SBS and do what you can possibly do.
Hey, pilot. Does your pilot uniform make a short flight feel like a transcon slog? Flight Uniforms have reinvented aviation shirts with 3D stretch, stain repellents, and no wrinkles. These shirts are just plain comfortable and ready for takeoff right out of your rollerboard. Flight Uniform is trusted by more than 25,000 pilots, and their flagship flight shirt has over 1,500 five-star reviews. I've worn every pilot shirt out there, and if you know me, you know I only wear Flight Uniforms. Be the envy of every cockpit at flightuniform.com and get a special podcast exclusive discount with the code SpitfirePod20 to take 20% off your first order at flightuniform.com. We have certainly had a lot of conversations in our life where you are basically telling me to pull my head out of my ass. And, I'll run things by you. You're my first stop on, should I do this? Should I do that? How can I've always had this idea of trying to find a way to be successful. And you basically tell me to stop trying and just be. And that is the success. But also, like, the other thing you tell me is that there are, like, you can do this. Like, if you want to go do this, then freaking just pull up your pants and go, man, and just make it happen for yourself. And when there's adversity, who do you think you are? You know who you are, and so go be who you are and succeed. And that's ring true. Even in failure, there has been success following that. And this road has not been paved with rainbows and butterflies. And so when that adversity hits, I love being able to have that conversation with you to just get your perspective and hear what you're telling me, so that I can, I feel like everything I'm doing, you've already done. And so everything I have, it's funny, I also feel like I'm your kid. That's
Well, that's true. You are, and I have a whole lot of kids out there. And you've spoken with quite a few of them, because a lot of them have decided that they want to be Nick when they grow up. And so I will send them to you for the conversation, because you're very, very willing to share at least a few minutes with people, and you've spoken to a lot of the kids. And in that particular case, and they'll all come back to me and said, spoke with Nick, it was terrific, thank you. But, it's all about just going forward with it. And there are a lot of them. Let's share just a short story right now. I'm working with a young man whose brother is flying helicopters in Rota right now. And so he decided, he's an older brother, and the younger brother decided he wanted to be a Navy pilot. And so that, and you know him very well. Yes, you do. Yes, you do. And so I'm working with him. And the thing is that I was not able to work with him in working on his private. And so a lot of times people will pick up things in their flight training and the law of primacy takes over. And it doesn't matter how hard you work to try to get the primacy out of there. When things don't go really well, primacy takes over. And even though primacy is not right, it still wins. And so I had a conversation with him regarding everything that he does is about fear of failure. And it's not about, it's not about success, it's about failure. And I finally just made it very clear to him that I was going to be bringing C4 to the cockpit, and that I was going to be blowing up everything in sight, because it is not in his best interest to continue doing what he's doing and expecting different results. And the other thing is unless and until he can change his point of view and his wiring to, I am a good, capable pilot, and I don't have anything to be afraid of, because fear is everything in this particular case. And if you're afraid to fail, guarantee you'll fail. And so you just have to change that mindset. And again, he's one of my children, but this is a child that needed a little bit of a timeout. And he'll do very well. He's a very, very talented young man. But you got to be there when you got to go ahead, bring the C4 if you need to. God, I hate bringing the C4.
Listen, when I came out to Ventura to do my training at the airport, a gentleman that you knew let us use his plane, and he was a wonderful human, and you and I went flying, and I thought it was going to be so cool and so easy, and you wrecked my life. It was so hard. You were so focused on being like, it was like flying with the CEO of the Blue Angels, like, and I couldn't hold up plus or minus 500 feet, and you're like, Nikki, what are you doing? Calm down. Like, and you brought the C4, like it just was, but also it's exactly how I learned, and it's exactly what I needed. And it was so like, and I think I had such a hard time with it because I wasn't good at it. And I had left the Navy being really, really good at my job. And that was the last time I had been behind the stick. And then I felt like I was letting you down, because I felt like I was just wasting this time, because you got your multi-engine qual the morning the morning of the day you picked me up from the airport. You got your MEI so you could teach me.
Yeah, because I had been a multi-engine pilot since my days in San Antonio. It's back in the mid-'70s. And I've been flying multi-engine, but I never, ever was in an environment where I needed to be a multi-engine instructor, nor did I really have any passion to be a multi-engine instructor. That's just one of those. There were other things that I would rather focused on in training. And, but I did. When you called, I went ahead and that was my motivation to go ahead and get that done and to get a little bit better in terms of my own skill set. And so that's right. And that I got my MEI for you so that we could go ahead and spend at least those 11 days together, or part of 11 days together. and get you at least moving forward to that lovely adventure that you had post or pre and post COVID. But nonetheless, it was a blast. And the reality is that again, it was about here's the guy you were sitting along the side of the pool, and you never think, I'm not going to get picked for the team. I mean, I'm here as kind of a fill-in, but you never expected it to happen. And then it did. And now we had 10 days. We couldn't screw around.
Yeah. I had decided, because I had the RV park and I was having a hard time at my RV park. I had a business partner and we had a strained relationship, and it was really difficult. Just interpersonally, and also it reflected in family life too. And we were living on the park, and I only had those couple days because we had to find somebody to run the park for me while I was gone. And it was miserable. And coming out there, you and I, every day after we would go get up, we'd go do have breakfast, go flying for most of the afternoon, come home, and then you and I would go for a walk around the neighborhood, and we would walk a couple miles, and you would just talk to me about I was just in receive mode. It was just like ultimate life lessons nonstop for this entire walk. And and you're walking fast. I'm a slow walker, and you're just killing it. And I'm 30 years younger than you, and you're just crushing me. And it was I was probably as thankful or more thankful for that part than I was just the flight instruction part, because it just, I wish everybody could go through flight school like that,
And and I'm not like that with everybody. in terms of going into the cockpit with the C4, because that is actually the tool of last resort. And generally speaking, you don't have to go there, but sometimes you do. And in your particular case, man, we had to get you ready for the main event.
Yeah.
And there was you see, at that point, and I said this earlier, you were all in. I mean, you and I talked multiple times about your frustrations with what was going on with your partner at the RV park. And we would talk about it. And I was so much aware of it. And I knew the decisions that you had made. And I knew the kind of personal, familial, and financial impact that you were going to be doing. Fortunately, you, at least at some level, you had been trying to save your nickels and dimes, and you had kind of halfway figured out how maybe you might be able to do this and then go to work for $18 an hour. But, nonetheless, you decided that this is what you were going to want to do. And so what was the option? You had a check ride in 10 days. You needed to go home. So what could we do? I could sit there and just love you and hug you and say, it'll be okay, Nikki. But we didn't have that. We had to get you home with a multi-engine rating, and then you could go ahead and start sending out all the paperwork that you needed to do to go to work.
Yeah. Listen, and that check ride was so hard. It was like a 3.5 hour brief. I had never thought for once we would have this brief. I'm glad I did studied my ass off, because the DA-42, if I remember correctly, had Volkswagen turbo diesel engines, two of them. And he asked me, I'm glad I know car engines, because this thing, we talked about how diesel is different than gas, and how how the plane works. It was almost like a Navy NATOPS check, where you're drawing systems, and step by step, I'm a drop of fuel, I'm a spark of electricity, bring me through the process. And it was, and that by the time we were done with that brief, I thought for sure, this is over. We're not even going flying, because man, that was the most straight-faced poker player I've ever met. And
oh yeah,
he was good.
Absolutely. And believe me, all the time. But the other side of it is he the other part of who you are as a human being came through in terms of the work that you'd been doing in your other life in the Navy, the work that you'd been doing down at Pensacola, and all of that he was really quite interested in. And that made a big difference. That other piece of your package made a big difference too. Maybe, he just wanted you to do well. And so he had to do what he needed to do. But he's very straightforward. He was one of the most senior DPEs in the Van Nuys Phys Day. And he was actually until his death. But he was a really good guy.
Great guy, man. I wish everybody could have gotten a chance to fly with him. Well, Mr. Phillips, I love you. I appreciate you. So many things we could talk about, and I'm just glad we got it on tape.
Yeah, I'm glad we did too. And if Asadi decides that he really thinks he wants to be a pilot, at least anything else, he can come out and we can give him some adventures out here that he'll not get in Georgia, believe me.
Listen, I almost forgot. I almost forgot to mention, listen, yesterday I got home from a trip and Fasadi ran up to me and you had sent him his first logbook.
Yeah, so his first entry in the logbook is going to be what? Huh?
So a few weeks ago, an intern who works for my company reached out and asked if he could jump seat with me on a flight. And he listens to the show and he's just the best kid you ever met. And I said, absolutely, I'd love to do it. And he comes out, we fly to Fort Lauderdale and back. He couldn't get the jump seat because the jump seat was already booked for the first flight. So he flew down in the back, non-revving to Fort Lauderdale and then jump seated back on the way back at night. We didn't get home until like 11 or 12 and he had worked the entire day at the company and it was just, but he wanted to do it. He was ending his time at the company and going back to college. And he says, hey, if you ever want to show your kids the simulator, I'm in charge of booking that. And so I called him up and said, can we do that? We had one day to do it. And he said, I have 1 o'clock in a 767-300. And if you want to come out, let's do it. And I went straight to the school, took my son out of school. We drove down to the headquarters and he got to fly his very first flight in a 767-300 in the simulator. We put it on motion. We picked it up, flew it around, flew an ILS. We turned on the turbulence to severe turbulence and he shook like crazy and flew the approach in and put 30 knot gusting crosswinds in there and hour and a half of awesomeness. And he gave him a certificate. It was so sweet and so cool. And I was talking to you and you're like, why don't you put it in a logbook? It's Class D simulator. I had no clue. Didn't even occur to me that was I don't know anything about aviation these days. And so I said, what logbook should I get him? He's like, don't worry about it. You said, don't worry about it. I will send him something. And that you wrote a really nice note in there. And yeah, it's awesome.
There we go.
It's awesome.
You just got to keep going forward.
Got to keep
now.
Going forward.
It's a delight. It's a delight seeing you and spending this time with you. You're doing a terrific job. Don't stop. And thank you very much for sharing this time with me this morning or your afternoon. But it's been a delight. And give my best to Dan and the kids.
Listen, I'm supposed to do the goodbye. I'm the host.
Okay, you say goodbye.
I love you. You're awesome.
Thank you.
That's it.
Peace out.
Peace out. All right, pilots, that's a wrap on this episode. And I know what you're thinking. You need to make yourself a little bit better. So how do you make yourself a little bit better? You tighten up your resume. So here's what I want you to do. Go over to my website, spitfireelite.com/podcast, and you can download my free resume template. It is tight, organized, and it's the perfect pilot resume. It's just something I like to do for the pilot group, and it is free to you. So go over there, spitfireelite.com/podcast, and download your free resume template. While you're over there, look at all the services that we offer. Lots of great interview prep, lots of great application review. Everything you need to be a professional pilot is right there. spitfireelite.com/podcast. Thanks, and I'll see you on the next episode.